the International Soccer Preview. We are Soccer Files Canada. Welcome to Series 20, the 2023 African Cup. This episode is part 2 of the players of Cape Verde, the final selections. Here we go. Hello and welcome back to the International Soccer Preview by Soccer Files Canada. We're back for part 2 of our mediacast on the players of the 2023 African Cup. This episode deals with the final selections of Cape Verde. In part 1, we compiled a list of the players and their likelihood of reaching the final squad. And we ran out of time, actually, to do part 2 for some of the teams of the African Cup. So today we're going to go back and review that and to complete the collection, as it were. The tournament has actually been played by this point, but we're going to take the perspective of just before the tournament here, as if we were doing the mediacast when we intended to. This mediacast is divided into 3 sections. Section 1 is some preliminary information, including a look at the games played in November and in January. Section 2 is the main part of the mediacast, a review of the lineup that was, not of the lineup, but of the roster that was released, the preliminary and final rosters, and we're going to compare that to the list that we compiled in part 1. And in section 3, we will review new players, surprise selections and non-selections, and injuries as well, kind of a summary of things that we'll also see in part 2. And then also in section 3, we're going to end with a revised list of the players that we think will be starters. Just a quick word before we begin on our future plans. In the fall of 2024, we had hoped to review qualification for World Cup and for any other tournaments like the next African Cup, which is at the end of 2025. We were a bit ambitious there, and we're going to have to put off those qualification updates until the spring of 2025. But stay tuned for an update once we've decided what we can do. Okay, let's jump right in and into part 1. So just some preliminary information here on the team. So my graphic is not behaving well. That's because I'm in the wrong place. Okay, for the squad, teams were allowed to bring 27 players, and Cape Verde only brought a 20. Cape Verde produced a 53-man preliminary squad there. However, in the end, they only bought 23 players, and I'll tell you how that went down. Again, teams were allowed to bring 27 players to the tournament. That decision was actually made in mid-December, raising it from 23 to 27. With the 53 players on the preliminary squad, they therefore had to cut 26 of them, but actually they cut 27, so they put out a 26-man final squad. Among these 26 players, one was injured and he was replaced. We'll see that in section 2. And then 2 players declined the invitation to the final squad, preferring to focus on their club soccer, and those 2 were not replaced. So 26 men down to 24. So that's what they have, is a 24-man final squad. All right, next order of business here is games that they played. So we're going to look at the 2 games in November. Those were World Cup qualifiers. We're not really interested in the results, to be honest here, but just interested in the lineups, the players. Anyway, those 2 games in November were against Angola and Eswatini. Then in January, they had 1 pre-tournament friendly, and that was against Tunisia. So there we have it, 3 games before the Cup to see who it was and perhaps inform our guesses as to who the starting lineup, starting players will be. Let's move on to that then, the candidates. And we begin with manager Bubista. So we're going to consider him a selection, as it were. he has not been fired or anything. So we'll say he's been selected and move straight on to goalkeepers. So here we had two definite candidates. The first one, Vozina, and the second one, Marcio Rosa. Again, if you want to know why we are putting those players in those categories, you can go back to part one and we kind of justify it. For goalkeepers then, two definite candidates, no likely candidates, but two at the possible level, Dylan Silver and Bruno Varela. And we also put an interesting case, Sixten Molen on the squad, the Dutch-born player, who we put him on the squad because of an interesting story. You'd have to go back to part one to listen to it. We won't repeat it here, though, because he was not selected even for the preliminary squad. And so we remove him from the list. I think Kevin Sousa there is remaining over from our list of the 2021 squad. He hasn't been selected for quite some time. So we had removed him in part one. There. So we have four candidates here, probably, most likely, three of them. Well, we know who will be brought to the cup. My head is back in part one here. Let's see. Vozina, our definite candidate, and the other definite candidate, Marcio Rosa, both of those selected for the squad. So it's between the two possible candidates, and as we suspected, Dylan Silva was selected. Bruno Varela just making the preliminary squad there. So those are our candidates. And now it's time to check which of these three have been starting over the past three games. So the two November games, the World Cup qualifiers, we had Vozina starting both of those. And in the friendly against Tunisia, he was also the starter. So we're quite confident he'll be the starter. And that's actually what we thought at the end of part one. Also, on we go to defenders and central defenders. So let's go over the candidates that we had. We had Roberto Lopez, also known as Pico, as a definite candidate there, and also Dini Borges, two of those definite candidates. One likely candidate, Logan Costa, and three possible candidates, Stopira, Ivanildo Fernandez and Del Miro, the three candidates there. Let's see who made it. So Roberto Lopez or Pico and Dini Borges are two possible candidates there. Both of those selected for the final squad. Also the likely candidate, Logan Costa, selected for the squad. Stopira, we'll just talk a little bit about him. He actually is still coded as a left defender, but he has been playing more as a central defender, especially when they use a three-man backline. So we did move him to central defense here in part one. He is the captain of the team. But he ran the risk of not making the squad because he was without a club since July 2023. And it was a bit ironic that we said of three other players, not of Stopira himself, that that not having a club is a bit of a death knell for a player, and there he was without a club. I don't know why we didn't mention that because it was since July 2023. Anyway, he went back to play in Cape Verde there, and just to have a club to play with, and so ensured his selection for this squad. So Stopira, captain of the squad, selected. Ivanildo Fernandez not even making the 53-man preliminary squad there. He was just a possible candidate. But Del Miro, our third possible candidate, was selected, at least for the preliminary squad, but didn't make the final squad either. So there we have it, four central defenders, which is a bit short, but let's see what it looked like in the game. So in November, we had Logan Costa and Roberto Lopez. We noted in part one that Roberto Lopez is a bit of a staple there. So it was always somebody playing alongside of him. And I believe Logan Costa was our most likely candidate, although we didn't commit to it in terms of nominating him as a starter. And the second game, had Patrick Andrade, who we're going to meet actually as a midfielder, and João Paulo. So a pretty experimental game in the central defense against Eswatini there. Neither of those coded as central defenders, but we did have Roberto Lopez playing as a left back. So really kind of trying out positions. They usually do that up front, Cape Verde, but now we see it at the back. Maybe because they were playing a fairly weak team, and even with that lineup, they won the game 2-0. So there we have it. Against Tunisia, we see a three-man backline, and it is Roberto Lopez, Costa, Logan Costa, and Moreira, who I've seen his name before. I'm not sure if we're going to meet him, though. Well, we must, because he's playing directly before the Cup. I think he is a central or a defensive midfielder. Anyway, so I'm just seeing if any of the others are playing in different positions, particularly Stopira, because I'm surprised to not see him there. And no, as far as I can see, we don't have him on the field. But he is selected for the squad, so there we go. And we move on to left back position. And okay, let's look at the candidates there. We have a definite candidate in João Paulo Fernandes. He's also, if you're looking at the YouTube video on this, see that he's coded as a central midfielder, and he has played actually as a central midfielder and elsewhere. We just saw him as a central defender too. He does kind of roam around the field, so a pretty versatile player. But we, for our discussion, moved him to left back in part one, so we'll keep him here for now, but don't be surprised to see him elsewhere. João Paulo Fernandes. The other left back here is Dylan Tavares, and we had him at the likely level. And both of those candidates made it. João Paulo Fernandes and Dylan Tavares both selected for the final squad. Let's go to right backs before we look at the games again. And we had no definite candidates here, but we had a likely candidate in Willy Semedo, who we did note in part one is coded as a left winger. But it might have been partly because they seemed to lack candidates back here at the time that he came back. And for the second half of the period we looked at since the last African Cup, so that would basically be 2023, played as the right back quite a bit. That's why we moved him over here. But now we do have three possible candidates: Stephen Furtado, Stephen Moira. This is where we see Moira. He's a right back. He played in central defense there against Eswatini, and João Correia. Three of those possible candidates. So let's see who made it. Willy Semedo, unsurprisingly, selected for the squad, and may not necessarily be playing as the right back, but that's been the recent case. Steve Furtado, only the preliminary squad there. Stephen Moreira, playing as the right back, and I said against Eswatini, but no, it was against Tunisia. Playing as the right defender of a three-man defense there, but he's coded as a right back. And João Correia is one of the two players who declined the call-up, preferring to focus his attention on his club team, which is Chaves in Portugal. So he is not part of the squad and won't be there. Let's now look at left backs and right backs in the three games. So in November, we had João Paulo Fernandes playing as the left back. We'll do left backs all together here. We saw Roberto Lopez kind of out of position playing as the left back in against Eswatini, and against Tunisia. We have a three-man defense, but João Paulo, not on the field. No, there we have him roaming around as we expected here. He's playing as an attacking midfielder, João Paulo Fernandes. So always an adventure with him. Let's go over to the right back, and we see Willie Semedo playing the two World Cup qualifying games there. And again, a three-man defense, Moreira playing the right back midfield, and yes, Willie Semedo just a substitute in that game. Okay, so in terms of starters, we do think João Paulo Fernandes will be the starter, and Willie Semedo on the right. Okay, on we move to the midfield, and we look at defensive midfielders. Here we only have two candidates at the possible level, and they are Kevin Pina and Cuca. And we're also going to introduce a new candidate too. So Kevin Pina selected for the final squad. So was Cuca, both of them selected for the final squad. And then our new candidate is Laros Duarte. And Laros Duarte is a Dutch-born player, new to the squad, having never been selected prior to being named to the preliminary squad. And so a bit of a surprise then to also make it to the final squad. So three defensive midfielders all making it to the squad. And let's look at central midfielders before we take a look at the games. So for central midfielders, we had Jamiro Monteiro and Deroy Duarte. Well, if that name sounds familiar, it's because it's the younger brother of the new player we just met, Laros Duarte. So Deroy Duarte was actually on the team before Laros. Laros is new to the squad now, but both of them born in the Netherlands and potentially playing together as brothers here. We'll see if Deroy made it to the squad. But I'll finish kind of nominating the list. We have Kenny Rocha Santos as a likely candidate, and Patrick Andrade as a possible candidate. Sometimes he's known just as Patrick, but if you try to type that into Google, he'll appear somewhere near page 181. So we're going to call him Patrick Andrade. And all of the players we're talking about here made it. So the two definite candidates, Jamiro Monteiro and Deroy Duarte, will play alongside his brother. Kenny Rocha Santos, the likely candidate selected, and Patrick Andrade, the possible candidate, all selected. So that leaves us with three defensive midfielders and four central midfielders. So that's where they've devoted a lot of their resources to. Let's take a look at the games. And at this point, I'll tell you what the formations were for these games. In game one, it was a 4-3-3, and we're going to see shortly that we don't have any players coded as left and right midfielders. So it'll be these defensive and central midfielders covering the three positions. It's 4-3-3 also in the second game against Eswatini, but against Tunisia, a more defensive formation, a 3-2-2-2-1, or we could say a 3-4-3, or however you want to divide that up. But let's take a look and see who filled those spots. So we have actually Leandro Andrade, who is a more attacking player, coming back to play in the central midfield. We'll meet him shortly. Alongside, he's in the center, alongside Cuca on the left and Deroy Duarte on the right side. That was in November, the first game in November. In the second game, a completely different cast. We have Logan Costa, the central defender, in the center alongside Kenny Rocha Santos and Jamiro Monteiro. So 6 different players filling the positions there. When we look at the game against Tunisia, we have Duarte. I'm not sure which Duarte. That would be Deroy Duarte, and Lanini, who we're going to meet soon. In fact, more attacking players, Rodriguez and Bebe, all of them, we're going to meet soon. However, we do have Jamiro Montero, playing as an attacking midfielder in that game, which is no surprise because we have seen him playing further upfield before. So that's going to make it difficult to decide on the starters there, but we'll leave that until the end and move on to the left attacking midfield position. So that could be a left winger, left attacking midfielder, or left forward, which it will be in the 4-3-3 formation. As I said, no left midfielders and right midfielders. That's why we're moving up field to the attacking end of the field. And here we have a definite candidate in Bebe. Fairly new to the squad, but really inserted himself quickly. We have a likely candidate. We moved Gary Mendes Rodriguez over to this side, although it wouldn't be a surprise to see him playing on the right side either. And we're going to call him Gary Rodriguez. And then we had three possible candidates in Jovane Cabral. Clay, I should actually give his full name. Clay is Euclides Tavares Andrade is Clay, and Helio Varela, also a possible candidate. So let's see who made it. It was Bebe selected for the squad, as expected. Also, Gary Mendes Rodriguez, I think we also put him on the right side because he played there quite a bit too. But we'll just note that he was selected for the squad, even though his name is going to come up shortly. Jovane Cabral, the first of our possible candidates. We did actually have him, Jovane Cabral, as an injury doubt. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but he was selected. Clay, that's spelled C-L-E. With an accent. Clay was selected for the preliminary squad and not the final squad. And Helio Varela was selected for the final squad, but he is the second of the two players who declined the invitation, preferring to play, focus his attention on club play. So he plays for Portimonense in Portugal and did not join the team. So again, they weren't replaced, those two players who declined to play. So over on the left wing, well, we'll look at the games, but we'll do the right wing before we take a look at those games. On the right wing, we moved forward Ryan Mendes over to this position because he had shown up here quite a bit. Ryan Mendes, a definite candidate. We also put Gary Rodriguez as a likely candidate over on this side as well, because he does switch sides. And we did point out in part one that especially in the forward line, players shift around quite a bit up here. We also had Lisandro Semedo as a possible candidate. So Ryan Mendes, unsurprisingly, did make the squad. Gary Rodriguez, we already noted on the left side, made the squad too. And then Lisandro Semedo only making the preliminary squad there. So just the two candidates here, but again, we wouldn't be surprised to see out of position players coming in. All right, let's check the game again. 4-3-3 formation in the first two games, so that is going to be a left and right forward in a three-man forward line. We have Ryan Mendes playing on the left in the first game against Angola, Gary Rodriguez on the right, and Bebe in the middle. I suspect they're going to use Bebe as a forward because they really still haven't found an attacking forward, or sorry, a proper centre forward, and they're using these kind of more attacking midfield players for the position. It was the same three in the game against Eswatini, but no surprise, shifting around. So this time it's Gary Rodriguez in the middle, Bebe on the left side, and Ryan Mendes on the right side, where we have him coded. And then in the game against Tunisia, we actually saw that it was more defensive players playing as attacking midfielders. It could be a three-man front line, or it could be two attacking midfielders and one forward. Either way, it was Jamiro Montero and João Paulo Fernandes playing in the attacking positions. But it was Gary Rodriguez playing as attacking winger on the left, and Bebe as attacking winger on the right, and Ryan Mendes playing as the centre forward there. So again, you can see the shifting around that we're talking about. Okay, that is the midfield, and for some reason we put attacking midfielders among the forward line, and you can see in the 4-3-3 formation, in fact both of those formations, including the one against Tunisia, there is no place for an attacking midfielder. So that's why we have no definite and likely candidates, because they tend not to use this position that much. But let's look at the candidates. We had two possible candidates. So there we see Leandro Andrade, who we saw playing as a central midfielder in game one against Angola. The central midfielder there, but he is coded as an attacking midfielder, and but he was not selected for the squad. I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. First, let me finish introducing the candidates. The other possible candidate was David Tavares, and we also had a possible but unlikely candidate in Telmo Orkanjo. We usually don't introduce those players, but we did introduce him because he was part of the narrative over the past 2 years, and he was an injury doubt coming into the Cup, so we'll update that at the end. But long story short, Leandro Andrade and David Tavares only making the preliminary squad, and Telmo Orkanjo not even making the preliminary squad. His injury got the better of him, and we'll talk about it in more detail later on. So yeah, we doubt we'll see a formation relying on attacking midfielders, although we do see them using out-of-position players if they do ever have an attacking midfielder. Okay, so nothing to check there because there were no games with an attacking midfielder. We have no secondary strikers, so we skip through that section and move directly on to the forwards. And here we have a player, I called him Duck. I saw another website spelling his name not D-U-K as we have, but D-U-C, and I'm guessing the pronunciation's more probably Duke. Anyway, we had him as a definite candidate, although we didn't see him as a starter, but he's regularly called up, though not as a starter. We also have a possible candidate in Gilson Tavares. And then for some reason, we put Brian Texera, a possible but unlikely candidate, on the list. And that was that showed good foresight by us because he made it. So I'm not actually sure why we put him on the list, to be honest. He had been involved, I suppose, in over the past 2 years, but then several others had too that we didn't put on the list. I don't know. One player, though, we didn't put on the list was Giannini. That is Giannini spelled with a D, by the way, in case you're envisioning it in your mind. He's in a really interesting story here. I can't wait to get to it. But let's do our business first. Surprisingly, Duke or Duck, only good enough for the preliminary squad there, so their struggles to find a centre forward continue. Gilson Tavares, the possible candidate, we'll talk in a moment, but I'll say for now that he only made the preliminary squad. And Brian Texera, the player who we had as a possible but unlikely, was selected, so how clever of us to have put him on the list. Even though he was a possible but unlikely candidate. Now let's get into the stories a little bit. The retired player Giannini, I'll tell you his story. We hadn't had him on the list because he had last played for the national team in November 2020, so quite a while ago. He was a player in the 2013 and 2015 African Cups. However, he was not selected for the 2021 African Cup. Well, park that, he was selected for the 2021 African Cup, surprisingly, because that was in January 2022, and he had last played for the team in November 2020. So he was a surprise selection for that cup. However, he was injured before the tournament and had to be replaced by another player. Well, lo and behold, the exact same thing happened here. Still hasn't played for the national team since November 2020, but nevertheless selected for this squad, surprisingly, and then injured before the tournament and replaced again. So the exact same thing as what happened in 2021 happened to Giannini. So that's unfortunate, and we're going to remove him from the squad then. And the player who came in to replace him is Gilson Tavares. So he moves from the preliminary squad to being selected for the final squad. Gilson Tavares, our possible candidate. So interesting goings on there. And let's take a look at the games to see who was playing as a forward. Well, we've actually gone through it because it was none of these players. It was players we mentioned as attacking midfielders. So Verde in game one against Angola, Eswatini, Gary Rodriguez against Eswatini, and then Ryan Mendes against Tunisia. And what this all probably means is that they have been searching for an out-and-out centre forward for quite a while. Duke looked like he would be a candidate, but never actually started for the team very much. So wasn't the candidate, and they end up still using attacking midfielders in the position. So that's it. Okay, that is it for section 2, the main section of the mediacast here. And so we go on to section 3, where we basically summarize and then try to predict our starters. So let's go with that. And section 3, oh, I'm missing my graphics for that. Okay, well, I'll create them as we go. Notable non-selections is what we start with. And we have just the only likely or definite candidate who was not selected was the definite forward, Duke or Duck. We did expect him to be a starter, not a starter, not at all a starter, but we did expect for him to be selected, but he was not. And really, that's the only surprise in terms of non-selections. We do have a couple of surprise inclusions, and the first of those is Brian Texera, the forward who we had at the possible but unlikely level. Was selected for the squad. And then the strange case of Giannini, who was selected for the squad, but then, as in 2021, was injured and had to be replaced. So both of those players were surprise selections for the final squad. The next section is new players. We just have the one player, Laros Duarte, older brother of the other Duarte, whose name is escaping me, Deroy Duarte. So the brothers will be on the same team here. And then finally, an update on injuries, and I promised a few of those. So the first category is those who have recovered from injury. So the first one is left winger Jovane Cabral, who we had tagged as an injury doubt in November because he was injured for those November games. His injury lasted only as long as the November international break did, and he was back playing with his club on the bench in the game after the international break in late November. So that turned out not to be a serious injury. He was also fit for the January warm-up game, even though he was on the bench for it. So recovered from injury, Jovane Cabral, and selected for the squad. An injury doubt, but still on the roster. Well, we don't have any in this category. But we do have a couple of players who were dropped due to injury. So we've talked about him. Giannini um, selected for the squad, but then deselected. And I thought there were two, but there's only the one. Oh, we put him in injured but not a strong candidate category, Telmo Orkanjo. And yeah, he had been a possible but unlikely candidate anyway. And he had a cruciate ligament injury, which ended up lasting all the way to the Cup. So whether he would have been selected or not is anyone's guess. We had thought probably not. But anyway, his injury ruled out any consideration. Okay, we move on to our spotlight review, or we finish with that. What you see if you're looking at the screen on YouTube here is what we came up with at the end of part one. So we're really just revising any changes here. So we have Bubisa, the manager, as a definite candidate, and he has not been dismissed or anything. So he is a starter, we'll say. Goalkeeper Vozinha, we're still confident that he's going to be the starter. In fact, the last three games bolstered our confidence about that. In central defense, we have Roberto Lopez as a standard, and we're going to stick with that. He didn't play all three games there, but we're still confident that he will be a starter. There was always a question, though, of who's going to play alongside of him. And there are several candidates, but our favorite among them right now is, we had nominated Logan Costa at the most likely, but now I'm not really sure. It could be Dini Borges. And it would be a bit odd if the captain, Stapira, was a substitute, although he didn't show up in any of the three recent games. So really up in the air as to who's going to play alongside Roberto Lopez. And, it could be a three-man backline for all we know. If it is a three-man backline, we do sometimes see left backs and right backs coming in to play in that backline. We had for left back João Paulo Fernandes and Dylan Tavares. We talked about that being a rotation, but our current thinking is that because João Paulo Fernandes also plays in other positions, that he will be a starter somewhere on the field, perhaps at left back or perhaps somewhere else. We saw him in central defence and in attacking midfield. He's all over the place. Dylan Tavares, meanwhile, remains a possible starter, especially if João Paulo Fernandes plays in a different position. So we'll leave him in a blue highlight, suggesting that he may be a starter. Right back, it still seems like Willie Semedo, whether he did come back to play there because of a lack of other reliable candidates. He does seem ensconced there now, Willie Semedo, so we nominate him as a starter at right back. In the central midfield, we had Jameiro Montero and Deroy Duarte as the players who we thought were going to start. And I don't think we're going to change that despite the large number of candidates we have. We do think Kuka could be in there with a start. So we have seen various players in the position. I'm going to change both of those to a blue color. I just want to take a quick look at the games. I mean, we did see Montero start, but as an attacking midfielder against Tunisia. And he only started one of the November games. So yes, I think the right decision is to put them both in blue as maybe starters. But really, there are a number of candidates who it could be. Going over to the left wing, well, we do see a lot of rotation up front, but we'll still nominate Bebe as our starting left winger, keeping in mind that that could mean he starts on the right wing or up front, as all of these forward positions could do. But we do think Bebe will be a starter on the field. I mean, now that we know they haven't found a centre forward, it could be him in that position too. Ryan Mendes and Gary Rodriguez, well, we were always in a bit of doubt as to where to put Gary Rodriguez because he starts left, right, and centre. But actually, I'm going to nominate all three of these players as starters, Bebe, Ryan Mendes, and Gary Rodriguez, because they do seem to be um, uh, starting players, and there aren't really strong challenges to their starting positions. So that's it, the spotlight. We have quite a few players who we're confident are going to start, and we'll look to game one to really see, well, how correct we were, and who is in some of the positions we were a little less doubtful about. All right, I hope that helps you appreciate the Cape Verde team, and we will see you probably in 2025 for Cape Verde again. We would like to thank Pixabay and Alexei Ivanov of Mappa Music for the wonderful background music accompanying this mediacast.